The disappearance. When the call came in, Ranger Daniel Hale assumed it was another one of those routine early winter rescues, some overconfident hiker misjudging the temperature and getting turned around in the backcountry. It happened every year. People forgot that the forest didn't care how experienced you were, but this one bothered him. The missing man, Evan McAllister, wasn't a tourist. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't inexperienced. He was a 34-year-old wildlife biologist from Montana, trained in tracking, survival, and remote navigation. The kind of guy who could step backward into any forest in America and still find his way out. He'd checked in at the trailhead near Raven's Crest 3 days earlier. Alone but confident. His pack was light, his gear precise. His plan: hike 12 miles in, set up 2 camera traps, and return the next afternoon. He never returned. His last GPS ping came from a region known as Copper Ridge, a high, exposed section of the forest notorious among rangers for inexplicable compass drift. Nothing supernatural, just geology, they said. Iron deposits. Electromagnetic interference. Simple, but Daniel had been there plenty of times. You didn't need a compass to feel that something was off in those woods. He told himself it was just isolation. The wind. The silence. The uncanny way sound carried, but when he heard they were mounting a full search, he volunteered immediately. He didn't know Evan, but he had a feeling this wouldn't be like the others. This one felt like the forest had already swallowed him. The search begins. Day 1 of the official search was uneventful. Cold, but clear. The air smelled of pine, frost, and the faint metallic tang of winter approaching. A 10-man team spread out, scanning the ground for tracks. Nothing. No broken branches. No dropped gear. No scuff marks. No sign Evan had ever walked those woods. By noon, the first dog team was brought in, 2 Belgian Malinois trained for wilderness search and rescue. The dogs were excited at first, sniffing, pulling, ready to work. Then they reached Copper Ridge, and everything changed. Both dogs stopped at the exact same point on the trail and refused to continue. They didn't growl. Didn't bark. They simply sat down and stared into the trees, bodies rigid, ears pinned flat. Their handlers tugged at their harnesses, coaxing, urging, nothing. One dog actually whimpered. Daniel felt the hair on his arms rise. Animals didn't fake fear. He walked ahead alone, stepping past the invisible line the dogs refused to cross. The air felt colder. Still. Too still. As if the forest were holding its breath. Anything? One of the handlers called. Daniel shook his head. No, he said quietly, nothing at all. But he felt watched in a way that made his back tighten and his instincts his turn around. But he ignored it. They all did. The first clue that evening, at base camp, someone noticed something odd in one of the photos taken by a searcher's body cam. It was a small, blurry glimpse, barely a moment captured between steps, but enough to halt every conversation around the table. In the distant tree line, maybe 30 yards beyond the trail, was a figure, too tall to be Evan. Too thin, shoulders slightly hunched, face hidden in shadow, still. Completely motionless. It wasn't one of the searchers. Everyone had been accounted for. Some argued it was just pareidolia, a trick of light, branches forming a humanoid shape. Others insisted it looked deliberate. Like something standing behind the trees, just watching, knowing the camera would catch only a fraction of its presence. Daniel stared at that frame longer than anyone. The longer he looked, the more he felt something was wrong with the way the figure stood, the way its head tilted, as if studying them. He blinked hard and looked again. The figure was gone. He brushed it off. He had to. They all had to, but none of them slept well that night. The camp that shouldn't exist. On day 2, they found the first undeniable sign of Evan, not him, just his camp, but it made no sense. The campsite was neat. Perfectly neat, tent set up with military precision, cooking pot cleaned and hung to dry, boots placed side by side beside the fire ring. There were no signs of struggle. No signs of panic. No indications he'd left in a hurry. The fire pit was cold, but not old. It had been used less than 12 hours earlier. Search command radioed Evan's family. Confirmed the make of his tent and gear. Everything matched, except for one thing. Evan had only packed enough food for one night. The campsite held enough for 3 days. Daniel crouched by the fire pit, staring at the carefully arranged logs, the precisely stacked kindling. It looked practiced but somehow wrong. As if someone had watched Evan camp before and tried to imitate the way a human would do it. The rangers exchanged uneasy looks. Where was Evan? Why was his camp so meticulously arranged? And who, if not him, maintained his fire pit last night? As Daniel stood, something caught his eye. A footprint, half buried in the mud, barefoot. Long, the heel too deep, the toes too narrow. Human shaped, but wrong. Nightfall on the ridge. The search was suspended at dusk. Protocol. Terrain was dangerous, temperature dropping fast, and no one wanted to fracture an ankle in the dark, but Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that stopping now was a mistake. That he stayed awake long after the others slept, listening to the forest. The wind. The crackle of the campfire, and then, sometime after midnight, the forest went silent, not quiet, silent. No wind. No insects. No distant creaks of trees, just a deep, oppressive stillness. His breath fogged in the cold air. He felt it again, that same sensation he'd felt on the ridge. Watched. He scanned the tree line with his flashlight. Nothing. Just darkness between the trunks. He exhaled and lowered the light. Then he froze. Someone was standing at the edge of camp. A shape, tall and unmoving, partly hidden behind a tree. He could just make out the outline of a shoulder. The faint suggestion of a head tilted in that unnatural angle he recognized from the body cam photo. Daniel's throat tightened. Hello, he called out, his voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't respond. Didn't move. Didn't breathe, just stood there, watching. He reached for his radio, never taking his eyes off the shape, and the moment his thumb brushed the transmit button, the figure stepped backward and vanished behind the tree. Daniel lunged toward it, adrenaline overriding reason, but when he reached the tree line, nothing was there. No footprints. No broken branches. No sound of retreating steps, just undisturbed forest floor. He stayed awake the rest of the night. Something had been there. He knew it. On the morning of day 3, they found something new. One of Evan's camera traps snapped cleanly from the tree, lying face down in the leaves. The SD card was intact. A wildlife tech immediately loaded it onto a tablet. Most of the footage was ordinary: deer, squirrels, a lone black bear. Then they reached the last clip. A video from just after nightfall on the day Evan vanished. It was shaky. Rushed. The camera angle wrong. As if Evan had grabbed it off the tree in a hurry. He's breathing hard, whispering something they can't make out. He keeps turning the camera toward the darkness behind him, as if checking for something following him. Then, halfway through the recording, he stops. He raises the camera slowly, and in the distance, through the grainy infrared, is that same tall figure, closer than it had appeared in the body cam shot, still motionless, still watching. Evan whispers, "Why are you?" The rest is too quiet to hear. Then the figure steps forward, just one step. A slow, deliberate shift of weight, almost curious. Evan's breathing quickens. He backs away. The figure takes another step. Then another, but every movement is too smooth, too fluid, too wrong. As if joints were bending in ways they shouldn't. Evan whispers, "Stop, stop." His voice is shaking. The camera jerks violently as he starts running. Branches whip past. Leaves blur. His breathing becomes frantic. The clip ends abruptly. The team stares at the screen, horrified. Someone mutters, "That wasn't a person." Daniel says nothing, because the last frame showed something none of them could ignore. The figure's arm, too long, too thin, reaching upward, as if to point at the camera. As if it knew it was being filmed. The riverbed. They expanded the search radius another 3 miles, focusing on the direction Evan had. By noon, they found the riverbed, and something else. Evan's shirt, torn and muddy, draped neatly over a rock. No blood. No sign of violence. Just wet fabric folded with unsettling care. Nearby, they found another footprint, the same barefoot impression as before. Long. Narrow. Human shaped, but not human. The footprint led toward a dense area of underbrush and disappeared. No other tracks. No signs of Evan. Daniel crouched by the imprint, holding his breath. The shape was clearer this time. The toes too long, the arch too deep, the heel too narrow, like something imitating a human foot. Without understanding the details, he felt sick. They followed the riverbed another mile before the search commander called a halt. The light was fading. The terrain ahead was dangerous. They return in the morning with more manpower, but Daniel didn't want to return. He wanted to finish it now. He didn't want to give the forest another night. The second camp near dusk, just as the team was packing up, a young ranger named Lewis called out, "You guys need to see this." They hurried over. It was another campsite, not Evans, not any hikers, just a single, crudely assembled shelter made from sticks and bark. Inside, on the soft earth, lay a collection of strange items, a pine cone, a dead bird, a strip of fabric from Evan's backpack, a small pile of smooth stones arranged in a spiral, and, at the center, a perfectly folded page torn from Evan's notebook. On it, written in shaky handwriting, were 3 words, "IT copies US." Lewis stepped back, pale. "What does that mean?" No one answered, because at that moment, something cracked in the trees behind them. A quiet snap, deliberate, close. They all turned. Flashlights sweeping the darkening forest, nothing, then, another crack, this one farther left, then another, shifting right. As if multiple things were circling them. Or one thing was moving impossibly fast. Daniel raised his light toward the ridge, and saw it. The tall figure. Half concealed behind a tree, head tilted, watching, just watching. "Who's there?" Lewis shouted, voice breaking. The figure didn't react. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. Daniel swallowed hard. "We're leaving," he whispered. No one disagreed. They backed away slowly, flashlights never leaving the tree line. The figure didn't follow, but it didn't disappear either. It just stood there. As if memorizing them, the final day search command was shaken. They cut the team in half. Dog teams refused to return. Volunteers dropped out, but Daniel stayed. He didn't know why. Maybe duty, maybe guilt, maybe because he felt they were close. Too close. At dawn, they returned to the riverbed. The air was colder. The forest quieter. They moved carefully, calling Evan's name every few minutes. At noon, they found him. Or what was left of him. Evan lay in a shallow depression in the earth, as if he had simply lain down to sleep. His eyes were closed. His expression peaceful. No signs of struggle. No trauma. No injury, but his body was wrong, too pale, too stiff. As if he had been drained of something vital before death. His clothes were arranged neatly beside him, folded, like the forest had undressed him, like something had studied how humans fold clothing, and tried its best to replicate it. A ranger knelt to check for any last signs of life. Daniel looked toward the tree line, and felt his blood run cold. The figure was there. Closer than ever, watching, studying, imitating. Daniel's voice cracked. "We're leaving. Now." No one argued. They carried Evan out as fast as they could, refusing to look back, but Daniel couldn't help himself. Just once, near the trailhead, he glanced over his shoulder. The ridge was empty, the figure was gone, but something else caught his eye, a new footprint, in the mud beside the trail. Long, narrow, and next to it, a second one. Smaller, more human, almost like whatever had stalked Evan, had spent the night practicing, trying again, learning, becoming. Aftermath. The official report said Evan died of hypothermia. The unofficial whispers said otherwise. The rangers who had seen the footage, the footprints, the campsites, they requested reassignment, time off, early retirement. Daniel turned in his badge 2 weeks later. He couldn't stay near those woods, not after what he'd seen, not after what he felt. Sometimes he dreams of the figure, that long, thin silhouette. The way it watched, silent and hungry for something he couldn't understand, and worse, sometimes he dreams of a second silhouette, shorter, smaller, more like a person, almost like a copy, almost like it was learning to walk like him. And some nights, when he wakes to the sound of branches tapping against his window, he swears he sees a shape just beyond the glass. Tall. Still. Head tilted. Learning. Waiting. Becoming.